Welcome back to this episode of the Transform IT, a Smartbridge podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Pauls, and today I'm joined by three military veterans and members of Smartbridge. I have Rob, Luis, and Zach. Zach is a veteran from the Coast Guard, Luis is from the Navy, and Rob was a Marine, but we don't hold that against him. With that said, I'd like to turn it over to each one of them and let them do a quick introduction, what they did, and why it's relevant to our experience in the IT field. So, Rob, can you kick us off?
My name's Rob Emerson. I did 9 years in the United States Marine Corps. My first 4 years were as a special operator. My last 3 years, 2 years of it was as an embarkation officer, and then the last year is when I started doing IT work for the Marine Corps, implementing the first Windows network for all Marine Corps Reserve Network. I've been out of the Marine Corps since 1999, primarily in the IT field, working across infrastructure, architecture, networking. I've also held some roles as marketing manager and advertising director and corporate, what do you call it? When you make up the branding, corporate branding director.
So apparently he wasn't overly qualified for that skill set because he couldn't even remember it.
Right.
Yeah, it was at a time when that was a buzzword just breaking out into the industry, and since my degree was in information systems, there was only so far I could take my creative desire into the advertising field. So I went back into IT after that, but it was a good break. So now I work here at Smartbridge. I am a manager in the digital informations group. I primarily deal with infrastructure consulting and infrastructure project management.
All right, Luis, what about you? What'd you do in the Navy?
I was IT in the Navy for 6 years. I went from Pensacola, Florida to the USS Emerson Land, where I was systems admin for 14 months, forward deployed around Asia. And then from there, after supporting subs there, I went to the Seabees, which I got to learn mostly a bunch of comms gear, mobile tactical field unit, So setting up servers in the field, turning them on, and then moving them after we shut them down. It was a good time being in the dirt. And then whenever we deployed overseas, we got to go to the PI primarily and set up comms out there.
So commo and IT, awesome. What about you, Zach?
Very nice. So I'm Zach. I did 4 years in the U.S. Coast Guard active duty, mainly stationed for 3 years in South Padre Island, then moved over to my last year in Galveston on a buoy tender. So basically what I did for most of my career, I was a boatswain's mate, and a boarding officer was my main collateral. And basically what I did in South Padre was law enforcement and search and rescue. So I worked with Immigration's Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol, different other units to handle law enforcement interdictions and activities on the U.S.-Mexico border. And I actually had no experience in IT whatsoever, besides your basic level of skill set coming into Smartbridge or exiting into my professional life in general. That's basically in a nutshell my military career.
All right. Well, my background, I spent 5 years in the Army as an airborne infantryman, deployed a couple of times, had a great time, was a heavy weapons expert, and decided I was working a little too hard and wanted to get out and do an office job. Went to school, computer science. Now I'm working with Smartbridge and doing the IT thing. A lot of fun.
Very cool. So for you guys, Lewis and Patrick, how did so I know like Rob touched briefly on his past career and collegiate activities and what he did there. How was y'all's transition getting out of the military into civilian life? If you did have any kind of college background or experience, how was that transition for you? And what's y'all's background basically before you got here?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start off on that one. It was actually, I'm not going to lie, I had a few bumps in the road on the way in. Civilian life is definitely different than military, especially when it's all encompassing. And you go from combat arms, MOS, or job into the regular civilian world and working with IT people. Let's just say I was initially loud, obnoxious, and abrasive, and a little too much for some people. And I've realized how to temper that a little bit. With that said,
We might want to realize that.
with that said, I didn't have a whole lot of trouble transitioning. I got out. I had applied to school. Ended up going to the University of Houston here in Houston, and like I said, my biggest thing was tempering my personality and my intensity for some of the less intense people. You get around a lot of IT software developers. Some of us are, we're pretty interesting people. Some of the other ones, like I said, they have more reserved personalities. And one of the biggest challenges for me was learning how to work with both sets of people and be able to, effectively communicate with them and get them to work in a group together without being too much and too overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that was my biggest issue with transitioning.
Yeah.
So me transitioning, I mean, I got a job here while I was still in the service for another month and a half. So I don't know, the transition, I didn't jump into college. I didn't have college prior to the service. So luckily I had an IT job while in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
So coming here, the transition was more so just getting accustomed to speaking more professionally,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose. And I guess the structure here in the civilian sector, at least here at Smartbridge, is a bit different from the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going in, having kind of a plan of the day. You have 6 meetings before you even start the day, technically, in the military. Here it's a little different. It's kind of, you come here and
You hit the ground running.
you hit the ground running, yeah.
Exactly.
So stuff like that. Prior to military, I didn't do any IT. I worked, chemical plants, refineries, because I'm from the southeast part of Houston, Pasadena.
Mm-hmm. Represent.
I also, then I went out to the oil field and I was roughnecking for about a year in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Tried to start a little business with ice cream trucks. Just different stuff. Nothing that had any relation to the IT field, So the military kind of set my my footprint for getting into the IT world, and then transitioning out. It's been smooth so far in the first year, because next month marks a year being out. So
Yeah.
I will have to say though, Smartbridge, when we pick up our employees, our consultants, even some of our contractors, we vet them very well. We go through, make sure they're qualified, and we have significantly higher standards than a lot of other companies from just based on the interview process and the quality candidates we look for.
Yeah.
With Luis, though, one of the things that he failed to mention is that a lot of the tools and technologies that we use here, not only did he use in the Navy, but he had technical certifications in lieu of the actual college degree. And when it comes to the technical field, that's something that I found that's very interesting, is a lot of people and a lot of companies don't really care about the 4-year degree anymore. As long as you're technically qualified, you have the certifications, and you can get the job done.
Very true.
And Luis is a great example of that. I mean, he came in, he had the technical expertise. He set up some projects, he executed on those, and brought us up to speed, and some best practices, things like that, and really helped out the process that we wouldn't have been able to do with someone that had just come out of school with a degree and knew how to do some IT stuff. But this was the technical expertise we needed to move us to the next level.
Right. That's actually a thing that we were looking into in one of these articles on military.com, is basically the benefits for veterans going into careers like IT and more adaptable, agile industries. Like for me, transitioning out, the biggest challenge was, I don't know in other services, did you all go through TAPS or anything like that when you're transitioning out? Yeah. So when I was going through that, I, like a lot of 23-year-olds, did not pay attention at all. I got out in the end of 2015, so I've been out for 4 years this month. And like I said, I had no IT experience whatsoever. So going into my first job, it was like you said, it was, basically, getting that or limiting that military filter in a professional environment. Hit the ground running with college pretty quick, basically just because of the post 9/11 GI Bill benefits. Like that's one thing a lot of veterans either don't know, or they aren't fully aware of all the benefits that are eligible to them, how they can even help them with housing and whatnot. But I took advantage of it pretty quick. My degree in my career path was marketing right out of the gate. So I went to University of Houston, Clear Lake. My degree was in marketing. My first internship to hire was a marketing coordinator for an oil and gas company. So for me, it's been marketing all the way around.
And you actually currently hold a position.
Yep. So hold a
marketing
here.
position, not an IT position.
Right. Yeah. So I do hold a marketing position here at Smartbridge as a marketing coordinator, going on my third year here. I was joined in 2018. So basically, even in supporting roles here, you have to have some qualitative form of technology, or at least adaptability to the technology, different platforms and different tools. But that's actually one thing where, according to this article on military.com, that we're looking at, a lot of veterans do excel in as far as their ability to learn out-of-the-box technologies, really any kind of out-of-the-box skill set.
I like to say this, I'm not trying to brag about myself or anything, so don't take this with a grain of salt. But one of the things that I know, and I've talked with some of the senior management and the CEO of our company, who has a military school background, but is not actually in the military, and never actually was in the military. One of the biggest things we look in when we hire people as a consultant is you have to be disciplined. You have to have a lot of self-discipline. As far as consulting goes, there's travel. We have to talk to a bunch of different clients. We have different skill sets. We have to learn new tools, new technologies, new people. We have to be social all at the same time to really be effective in our job. And but the core skill set that someone has to have is they have to have some self-discipline, because we're not going to have a lot of strong leadership. We're not going to have a lot of strong, refined structure, like Luis said, because depending on the day, the time, you may be working on one client and then have to transition on to another. So that self-discipline is really the core of one of the things that we look for when it comes to a consultant. And it just so happens that the majority of the members of the military that have gotten out and transitioned to the civilian sector have a higher level of self-discipline than a lot of the what we say college graduates or entry-level employees, specifically because they have that military background and that structure. Right. I really think that in itself sets them up to be successful consultants. And as our experience here, at least over the past 6 years with me and looking at the rest of the military members of our team, it really is true that we're go-getters and we have the discipline to make things happen and we want to succeed. So, it's one of those things. Failure is not an option, and whatever we have to do to get the job done. And I think that's a reoccurring trend amongst the four of us and previous members of the company that were in the military.
Okay. Yeah, so for Rob and Luis, I'm curious, coming from a guy who had really no IT background when I was in active duty. I think we had Coast Guard had an IT rate. However, for you guys, the technology that you were used to in your military service, how did that carry over to your civilian life, and how did you even get into that career path when you were active duty in the first place?
For me, there really wasn't a whole lot of correlation. When I joined the Marine Corps, I decided that I wanted to, put it bluntly, when I walked into the recruiter, I said, "Hey, I want to blow stuff up." And so they have a test. They have kind of a military IQ test, an intelligence test that you take that I didn't know about, called an ASVAB. So he said, "Okay, well, I need you to take this test." So I sat down and took this test, and he came back and said, "You qualify for these different types of jobs in the Marine Corps." He's like, "You're actually you're pretty intelligent compared to a lot of the majority of people that we get in here. So are you sure that's what you want to do?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So that led me into what was my first 4 years. After the first 4 years, I was kind of in that place that a lot of people get into after their first tour, and trying to understand if they wanted to make a career of it or if they wanted to move on. So I went into a special program that was basically, it was an active duty role, and you did a lot of work with reservists, and you were at the headquarters for all reserves. So you were active duty working with primarily reserve units, doing a lot of training and stuff. And so that's how I ended up being in our embarkation, which led to doing a lot of the IT stuff. Getting out into the private sector after I got out of the Marine Corps, again, the biggest challenge was mostly for me was the pace that we move at, and the soft skills. The soft skills was a big one, especially I think a lot of former military. That's the thing that they struggle with the most, especially if you're coming out of a leadership role in the military, where you have anywhere from 50 to 75 Marines or soldiers under your charge, and you're now going into an office space where you're just one person with peers, and you have that obvious breakneck pace that you're used to moving at and getting things done and pushing through the wall. And everyone around you that's not their mindset. It's kind of, I'm waiting for this person to do their job and this person to do this. Whereas our mindset is more, no, I'm going to take it by the horns and push it through. Yeah. And that really, in the private sector, that doesn't necessarily rub people the wrong way, but because that's something that they're not accustomed to, it really puts them on the defensive really quickly. Like, who's this person coming in here trying to, do all these things? Yeah. So it was a rough transition for probably, I would say it was something that I struggled with for at least 5 or 6 years. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I know that I still work on today, even in all across my different roles, is the soft skill portion and making others around me feel like they're part of the process. I think that's probably one of the biggest attributors to my success throughout the years in the private sector.
What are the differences for you guys in coming from a leadership role in the military? I know you just hit on a few, but I guess what is one main primary difference going from a leadership role in the military and then going from a leadership or management role into civilian life?
So I can start that out. One of the biggest things that I've seen is kind of like what Rob was saying, is you take the bull by the horns, problem, solution, execute. Yeah. You get it done. When you tell your team, okay, this is what we're going to do, let's make this happen, people jump, they make it happen, they do a pretty decent job, you get them what they need, and that's how leadership and management is supposed to work. Mm-hmm. When it comes to civilian sector, one of the things that you have to do is you have to manage people's relationships, or the relationships with the people and this specific individual. And like I said, that managing, emotions and relationships and the individual, opposed to managing the team and having people on board immediately, knowing that, hey, if I get an order, I'm going to go ahead and make it happen, to I have to manage the person as well as the project and the job that we're doing at the same time. That was a little bit of a, like I said, that was a little bit of a learning curve, and it's good and bad, because the more you learn your people, the more you know about them, the more efficient you are as a leader. At the same time, it can lead to a lot of additional work on your part to try and get the job done, that I noticed in the military, because everyone's so used to the structure, and when their leader tells them, hey, go ahead and do this, they just hop up and go.
Yeah, I think one kind of goes from the other end of the ladder too, is for those coming out of the military who are not in a leadership and management role yet anyway. They statistically grow that ladder a lot faster. However, coming from a really one of the biggest, how did you put it one time, like the biggest micromanaging organization on the planet being the military. So coming from a person who is not in that role yet, the ownership, the accountability, the willingness and adaptability to follow orders, to execute is obviously there. I think from just a regular civilian, that's a fundamental difference. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons why veterans do so well. Again, like you said, in the military, there's a lot of micromanagement that goes on. Yeah. And again, as military guys, as Rob said, we like to take the bull by the horn, problem, solution, execute, get it done, move on to the next task. And when you move into the private sector and there's less micromanagement because people just don't have the time or ability to do so, you're sitting there and you have, okay, I have this job, I got to get it done. they trust you. You go ahead and you make it happen. And because you're not being micromanaged, you're significantly more efficient and you can get a lot more done. And I think, like I said, I think that's a major benefit. And that's why a lot of the military members and the veterans move up so quickly, is because without that insane structure of the military that doesn't allow you to think for yourself, be innovative, actually make stuff happen, you have this, in the private sector, okay, go ahead, get it done. We don't care how you make it happen as long as it's efficient. And we can just go in and we have the big picture, we have the goal, and we can just get there and make it happen. And we like doing that because when you have the yoke of the military off of you, you're actually able to move much faster, much more efficiently, and really get to where you want to go in a great and efficient way.
Yeah.
So
Rob, would you agree with that, or do you think it's a little less so?
Yeah, I think that from a managing standpoint, it just is. It's different. There does take an adjustment. I mean, I've seen a lot of veterans where they transition into the private sector, and it doesn't necessarily bode very well for them because they can't make that adjustment as quickly, and everything changes. We're in a society now where we're in the age of the millennials, where you have to be a lot more thoughtful about what they're feeling and how they perceive things around them and directions that you give them. So I can tell you definitely that the Rob Ameson that got out of the Marine Corps in 1999 probably would not have been as successful in this day and age coming right out of the gate. So it takes, I think the biggest thing about veterans in the workplace is their ability to adapt to their environment, their ability to adapt to other personalities. But to kind of play off of something like that Patrick was saying earlier, I attribute your time in the military being a leader as kind of being a parent, because it's the do as I say, not as I do mantra. Whereas in the private workplace, it's going to be lead by example.
Yeah.
Right. There's a really big difference, because especially now with the younger workforce coming in and they're anxious to do and succeed and learn, they're really looking at you and observing you and kind of using you as a model of how they want to get to where you are and then succeed past that. Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm retouching on what Rob said about the whole do what I say. In the military, how it's an order. There's no. I feel like when you were in the military, you knew you were gonna clock out at 5, but if someone walks in at 4:59, it's like, we're staying till midnight. I mean, you're staying till midnight. There's no, for kind of whatever job there's. I mean, unless there's a special circumstance, but in the civilian sector, it's not that way.
Okay, you were in the military, right? You did the job. Now you're here. You're working as Smartbridge's internal IT and doing some consulting work whenever it's available to you. My question to you is, okay, so you're coming in from the other side. Guys like Rob and myself, we are in leadership positions. Zach is kind of off in right field on his own, making stuff happen. You, on the other hand, being fresh out of the military with, being an enlisted guy, and then now you're running the IT and you're working for other people. What is the biggest difference in management between the military and the civilian sector? And do you think it's beneficial and allowing you to do more, or do you think it's something that's kind of inhibiting your ability to move forward?
I guess in the military, management, specifically in the IT field, a lot of the time, people that stayed in, it's kind of messed up, that stayed in for 15, 20 years, they didn't really develop any new skill in the IT field. They didn't go get certifications. They no longer were working on the network or doing basic help desk. As they moved up, they became more admin people, right? So their skill, you had no one above you to refer to if there wasn't that technical guy there at your job. In the service, from the moment I got onto the ship, I was put into a management position. I was there for a month, then I had 9 people under me. By the time I left the ship, I had 14 people that worked under me. When I got to my new command, there was 3 of us in the shop, so I was the bottom person. And as they phased out, we got a bunch of new bodies, and then there was 5 people working under me. So I got to play the management role there. I mean, there's always a chief, so there was always the manager there. But in the IT side of the house, the actual IT networking, running help desk, running comms, they didn't really play a big part other than going to meetings and kind of laying out the big picture items, right? So the day-to-day, we got to get this stuff up and going. That was my skill set to push, drive that. Coming into the civilian sector, it's been different because, I guess now I have my second experience over at Quanta, which is different than here at Smartbridge, right? Here's a one-man shop, while over there it's a 20-person infrastructure team who does different roles over there. Here you kind of do everything, but you also have a manager who's doing 10 other things. So it's you don't really have anybody to tell to go do a project while you're also doing another project. So I guess here in the civilian sector, you kind of got it's just more about prioritizing rather than just driving one single mission, handling one mission at a time. It's managing 10 different missions at a time and figuring out which of those 10 missions is important that day. That's been the interesting side of the civilian side.
I think that what a lot of companies are starting, a lot of organizations are starting to key on is that the reason why hiring veterans into their workplace, especially in the technology field, is useful for them is because of the fact that you now are placing very ambitious and very self-driven people into the work layer of their teams that allows their leaders to free up to do other things because they now have these embedded leaders within their team, their worker line of their teams that can help lead efforts. There's never a moment where those individuals are just sitting idly by. They're always looking for the next thing to do. And so that helps drive the others on the team because everybody wants to be part of that process of success. And if your peer is saying, hey, we can get this knocked out next, let's go ahead and get it knocked out. Yeah. It's a lot more well received than when the manager or quote unquote the actual team leader is hovering above saying we need to get this done, we need to get this done, we need to get this done. It's that leadership by example, and it's also a strong thing of saying that with veterans we understand the concept of not having to be in a leadership role in order to be a leader, and that's not something that is easily taught in the private sector amongst the workforce because in that area it really is a dog eat dog world, right? Because everybody's looking for that next promotion, everybody's looking for that next increase in pay. When you're coming from the military, it is a very you watch my back, I watch your back throughout the course of that experience. So the military is very much about bringing the effectiveness of the entire team up together because no man's greater than the person next to them. It's a very different culture and mindset in most organizations in the private workforce. I think the situation at some of the clients that I've been at, the cultures have all been very diverse. Most of them have been that very cutthroat type of culture. There's not a lot of camaraderie. There's not a lot of team building. And then I've been on some they're the exact opposite, where there is a lot of team building and there is a lot of thoughtfulness on how they're placing people within their teams in order to get the whole team to excel and bring the skill set of all the individuals that comprise that team up because in essence, that's the only way the entire team gets better. So I think that's a very important thing that organizations are starting to look at when they bring veterans into their environment, into their workforce. I think one of the things that veterans, those thinking about transitioning from the military into the private sector, have to weigh, that I've kind of learned from my own experience, learned from talking to other veterans, and just from my own observations, is again the people skills is a big thing. If I'm not sure, I vaguely remember TAPS. But I don't think it was as well articulated when I got out as it should be now. But I definitely think that they should have some offering in there that helps veterans with those soft skills, helps them to develop those soft skills if they're going to go ahead and make that transition, so they're a little bit more prepared for that initial shock and awe of, I said something with a lot of authority and that person got upset and took it as bullying and went to HR, which is a real scenario.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Definitely.
I think that is something that veterans thinking about transitioning have to think about. Can you make that adaptation with something that's been ingrained in you for 10 plus years, with how you interact with people? And then the other thing is going to be just the mental rigors that come with transitioning from a daily routine to something that's very fluid, and that is the difference between transitioning from being in the military to the private sector. And I think Luis touched on it a little bit himself. When you're speaking from my experience in the Marine Corps, I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning. We're going to PT, coming back, getting dressed for our day in a uniform, and you know what your uniform is for Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday, and then you know what your uniform is for Friday. When you get out in the real world, you get up when you want to get up, as long as you're at work by the time that they tell you to be at work, which is usually 8 o'clock or whatever. Just again depends on the culture of your work environment, but most places it's 8 o'clock. So you get up whenever you want to get up and wear whatever you want to wear, as long as it fits within their dress regulations of what their business attire is.
Right.
And your day is, a lot of people go to work and they get to their desk and they log in and they go get a cup of coffee, they go get something to eat, they stop and chat at people's desks, and then probably an hour later they're actually starting to work, right? In the military, it's not like that. By the time you have your roll call first thing in the morning and they're telling you right then and there, this is what we're doing today, and as soon as you're dismissed, you're attacking that task. So again, it's just very fluid. If you feel like that regiment and that structure is something that you can't get more flexible with and deal with the onus of everyone around you being that fluid, it's definitely something that you need to think about, because it is very mentally taxing early on. Because you're wanting to move at that pace and you're looking for that guidance, you're looking for that structure, and you're just not going to get it in that way.
I will say, though, that I think that's one of the reasons why veterans are so successful, because you have the generic, as you said, kind of lack of structure in the civilian world and the overburdening structure of the military. And then after that initial shock and awe is over, what I think we do is I think we take the best of both worlds, right? So we implement our own structure to go in and attack the problems of the day and accomplish the tasks that some of the other people on the civilian side don't really have the discipline or desire to do. So it makes us a little bit more efficient, a little bit more effective, because we were able to mix both of those worlds together to really come up with the optimum solution for us to move forward and be the most efficient we can with working within the confines of our specific environments.
Yeah, I feel like y'all touched on it too as well. So going in the military and active duty, you very seldomly have nothing to do, and even whenever you do have nothing to do, you are actively looking for things to do. You're actively looking for that next task, because you know that your CO, your petty officer, whoever it is is going to be continuously doing rounds and making sure that preventative maintenance and whatnot is taken care of. So even if you're there's really not a lot of places to hide per se whenever you're active duty, unless, I don't know, for you if you're on like aircraft carrier, but I know for smaller land units like I was on, even if there was really not a lot of action items to be completed, you were constantly looking for that. So I think for me going into exiting the military and going into I worked at a bank for quite some time, and there was a lot of downtime. There was a lot of that leisure time whenever you were slow or during holiday hours or what have you. And for me, I felt like I was doing something wrong if I wasn't actively engaged in something, if I wasn't actively engaged in an activity. So going into the world of IT, that was a pretty nice adaptable avenue for me, because I feel like in the tech space, there's always a backlog of things that you could tackle. And while me as a veteran, I like working more in like that team dynamic, that team environment, as Rob was kind of touching on. You also have the ability to attack the backlog, the things, the desire to look for things and take initiative and things to get done, where you also are working actively on your own and you're taking more initiative and not being prompted to do anything. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of having a breadth of veteran staff in your workspace.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and we're coming up on our time limit for the podcast. But before we close out, I'd like to ask each one of you one question. You yourself, as a veteran, what is one of the skill sets or the most important skill set you took from the military, brought over to the civilian world, that's contributed to your success?
I think the biggest skill for me is managing stress and pressure, right? I think in every workplace that I've been in, especially here, I think everyone in the office space that's come in contact with me will probably echo the same thing, that they don't really ever know if I'm being serious or joking. And I think because for me, laughter is a great pressure valve in the workplace. And people always ask me, how is it that you can be so calm when everybody around you in this meeting is being so frenetic? And the simple answer is really, I've been in situations where, I have live rounds buzzing around my head. So this is just a walk in the park. Nobody's going to die today based off of what the outcomes of this meeting is.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, it's all of our responsibility to talk to each other with dignity and respect, and to keep in mind that we're in this together, and just take a deep breath and figure out, let's all get on the same end of the rope and pull. And that's the mindset that I take into every engagement with a client, and every workplace environment that I'm in. Is just, it's just work. It's not personal. And that I'm always that pressure valve. I always handle and manage that stress for the group very well by allowing them to laugh a little bit, even if, I have to be the center of the laughter.
Mm-hmm. I'll keep it pretty brief. For me, accountability. So the desire to not let things fall through the cracks. I feel like that's really something big I took away. So staying on top of follow-ups and just making sure that things don't go to the wayside, making sure that action items stay in the pipeline, and people that are owners for those items are kept accountable to deliver on time, to deliver on budget, to execute or support the entire plan to where things are done in a prompt manner. So not letting things slip away for the purpose of, okay, I just didn't get that email today. I just it's been a week or two since I talked to this person. I guess it's not going to get done. And you basically kind of sit on your hands and let it go by. The ability to prevent that from happening was my biggest takeaway.
So I think the biggest thing that I took from the military is perspective. Now, it goes a little bit with what Rob said and a little bit further, but the idea that big things are big things. Things, you're not getting shot at, you're not getting blown up. So, take everything with a grain of salt, enjoy your life, but really understand the kind of prioritize and execute, I think is where I'm really going with that, is that a lot of people get stressed out. They have 17 things to do. They can't manage everything. They don't know what's going on. They can't talk to people about it, and they just sit there and freak out. One of the things that I think really helped me is that, like I said, prioritize and execute. These are the things that are important. I inform the people that I'm working for or working with that this is what I'm going to do that day, and I'm able to move forward and make progress that, maybe not everyone's happy, but everyone's satisfied with. Mm-hmm. And having the ability to communicate that and understand and have that big picture perspective, I think has really helped me be successful in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because, in the civilian side, there's always too much work to do and not enough resources to get it done. So you have to pick and choose and then make it happen for what's best for the team and the company and yourself. So what about you, Luis?
Yeah, I'm sitting here really thinking. It's kind of a mix between the diversity that the military kind of had of people from all over the country with different backgrounds, and just kind of interacting with them on a day-to-day basis in a variety of scenarios, and then bringing that kind of into the civilian workplace where you understand that not everyone is going to understand what you're saying with a certain tone or with being short. Sometimes you have to go into detail for certain people, and just bringing that from the military side, meeting new people basically.
So what you're really getting at is working with a diverse group of people that are all different, communicate differently, and being that person that can really bridge the gap. And, some people need to have it broken down Barney style, while other people you can just give a high-level overview. But understanding those interpersonal dynamics and the things that you can do and what you need to effectively communicate the mission, the skill set, the goal, and so that everyone can accomplish a task and facilitate that process.
Yes.
I think also probably one of the biggest things for Luis is the skill set that he took and acquired in the military. I mean, that's changed his life. If you listen to what his story was before he went in and since he's come out, I mean, it's changed his life tremendously. You think about the doors that are open for him now and the path that he has laid out in front of him. I mean, he's got a very bright future. He's obviously has the desire to improve himself. You heard him tell the story about some of his fellow seamen not having the desire to acquire those certifications while they were, provided to them, and he went and knocked that out. So it's actually quite exciting to see what is going to happen in the futures of both Zach and Luis, because they took advantage of what they had in front of them while they were in the military, and they're obviously applying those skill sets in their careers now. And with them still being very early on in the career in the private work sector, it's exciting to see what's going to happen for them.
All right, well, that's about all the time we have today for this episode. We covered some pretty insightful ground regarding veterans in the IT industry. Rob, Lewis, Patrick, thanks again for joining us, guys. So if you liked what you heard today, you can listen to more episodes on our hosted platforms, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, and we are now on Spotify. Lastly, if you'd like more information on each episode or the overall podcast, visit smartbridge.com/podcast. Thanks for joining us.